Welcome to the Burgundy Golden Knuckleheads podcast. As always, got a little bit bigger smile today. It's my main man, Reggie. What's going on, Reggie?
Kenny, what's up, man?
Man, we got back on track, didn't we?
We did.
You know, we heard this a lot today. We heard this over and over and over, and we heard it
early and often.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
Right, we heard this early and often, man. It was an interesting game. Interesting game, right? We'll get into some of the specifics here, but it was one of those things, man, where Washington was never, ever in jeopardy, right? There was never any concern. I mean, we talked about during the game quite a bit about whether or not Marcus Mariota was going to ever get into the game, right? But it was an interesting game. I mean, we did our pre podcast as we previewed this matchup against the Tennessee Titans, and I wasn't very confident. You know, I gave it a 6 out of 10 in terms of my confidence scale, and apparently I had my confidence numbers backwards because I was a 10 last week against the Cowboys,
right,
and a 6 this week against the Titans, and apparently I should have had it the other way around based on results, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'll go over some of the stats here in just a second, but you know, if you had a key Washington Commander on your fantasy football team and you didn't play him this week, and you were missing out on some points, right? I mean, you hang up 42 points, 42-19 to finish the game, and 28 of it was in the first quarter. And when we thought for a second there was a chance that it was going to be 35, as time was dwindling down in the quarter. Jaden Daniels was 25 for 30. I mean, his completion percentage went up dramatically again, like it was earlier in the season. I did like that they started off and had a shorter passing game, getting everybody on track, getting the Titans to come up. Even the coverage had to come up to do all this. They did a slant early to Terry for a first down that I think they actually did a couple of them, but I'm like, we're successful with that. Why aren't we doing quick, easy slants for 7-8 yards? But Jaden Daniels had 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. That was off of a tip ball. And he rushed for another 34 yards. I'll just go ahead and throw all these numbers out real quick.
Okay.
A total of 463 yards of total offense, knocking on the door of 500 yards. B-Rob, 16 carries for 103 yards. Just picked up off the streets. Chris Rodriguez, right? We cut him one day. 4 or 5 days later, he gets picked back up with the injury to Austin Eckler. And he goes 13 rushes for another 94 yards. Total for the team was 267 yards rushing. The couple other 2 numbers that I thought stood out that showed how Washington's offense was productive and successful was third down efficiency. They were 9 for 14. That's very good. Considering we've struggled the past few weeks on some third downs and our offense overall. And then time of possession, Washington had the ball for 40 minutes and 13 seconds to the Titans 19 minutes and 47 seconds. 40 minutes to not quite 20 minutes. That's huge in the NFL. Normally, if you've got 5 or 10 minutes more, that's a lot. 10 minutes more is a lot. You've had the ball 20 minutes more than they did. it just goes to show how the game went right there with just those simple stats right there.
Yeah. This might be an unpopular thing to say, but the game was boring, right? For me, I like the fact that we were never threatened, but it was kind of boring to watch from the standpoint of it was good to see Washington kind of get back into rhythm and get back to playing in the manner in which we had become familiar in watching them play. They even mentioned on the broadcast is that the stadium had gotten pretty quiet when Washington having such a huge lead. And it's interesting as you mentioned those stats here, and I'm looking at them that it was a very complete game offensively. It's like what you see when we watch other teams play. You see the quarterback throw for 200 yards, 25 or 30, and 3 touchdowns. Okay, man, that guy quarterback had a good day. And then you see the running back had 16 carries, 103 yards, and the backup almost had 100 yards rushing. And then your leading receiver had 2 touchdowns, 73 yards on eight receptions. And that's typical standard NFL good quality team where you're playing good on all phases of the offense. And so this was good. Now we can't be ignore the fact that it was against the Tennessee Titans,
Yep.
who is not a good team. But the thing about it is they had, if I remember right, I don't have my notes here, but I think the number two ranked overall defense. And they put up, to your point, you mentioned 400 and something yards, almost 500 yards of offense on these guys. 267 yards rushing is the most rushing yards, as they put up on the screen there. For the previous record was 250 or whatever it was. And the last time was 2012 against the Dallas Cowboys back in December of 2012. And if you remember that year, that was the RG3 year, right?
Right.
And this offense, it was good to see us get back to what we saw again early in the season, which was the quick game. Jayden running the ball, extending plays, getting first downs. The receivers, tight end, he's throwing the ball to everybody, just getting everybody involved. And there wasn't a lot of big plays other than the running game. There wasn't a lot of big plays in the passing game.
Right.
And yet they were able to just put up a lot of points. And so it was good to see that the offense was once again being propelled by the run game. And that was what we had seen and very reminiscent of early in the season. That again put Washington now at 8-5. And as they mentioned, 8 wins. I think it's our first time since 1996. That's a long time, man, to get 8 wins.
That doesn't sound right. What with the first year RG3, we didn't have 8 wins?
Let me look. I don't think so.
Yeah. While you're looking that up real quick, you talking about the passing game. 8 different people caught a pass from Jayden Daniels. Again, that piggybacks on your comment about spreading the ball around to a lot of people. So 8 people. 6 of the 8 people had 2 or more catches. So again, everybody was in there, and with Terry leading the way, like I said, with 8 receptions, Dyami Brown 4. I commented at our table there at the sports bar, we saw a little bit more of Dyami Brown today. Man, I would like for them to find ways to get it to his hands a little bit more. When he catches the ball and he takes off running, it's a different speed. He gets up to speed quick. And I don't know that he's we consistently want him to be our number 2 receiver. I don't know if you consider Brown to be our number 2 receiver. I mean, maybe Ertz is our number 2 receiver, even though he's a tight end. But man, they need to find ways of getting him the ball, some quick slants or something other than just a deep ball. A lot of times we look at Dyami Brown as being a long baller, but whatever it is, if we can get the ball in his hand and create with him, I think he's one that, as we move along here, can just break them.
Yeah, I think he's a hell of a yards after the catch guy. I don't trust him going deep, which ironically is supposed to be his niche. taking
Right.
the top off the defense.
Right.
But I don't trust him for those big, deep 50-50 balls kind of thing. He's the kind of guy that you need to get it on a screen or a slant, get it in his hands, and allow him to make yards after the catch.
Yeah.
But to circle back to that stat I made here with the 8 wins, the most wins since 1996. The correction to that is the most wins after 13 weeks since 1996.
Okay.
To have 8 wins after 13 weeks is the most they've had since 1996.
Okay. That definitely seems more in line, and yeah, we started out hot here. And so, with that being said, we still have our next, well, we're off this week. We have a bye week, but then we have is it the Saints, New Orleans, Atlanta, and Cowboys?
No. My God. It's the Saints, Philly, Dallas.
Atlanta.
I'm sorry, Atlanta, and then Dallas.
Dallas. Okay. I don't know what I must have said something different instead of Philly. I was thinking Philly, but I think I must have said something different.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting with those. Without looking at anything, you would say we have 2 games that we should win, and 2 games are going to be challenging. But we thought that Dallas wasn't going to be that challenging of a game, but it turned out to be. Atlanta is one that I would say was going to be challenging, but then Kirk Cousins only put up 13 points and threw 4 interceptions today. One was a pick 6, and it was an ugly pick 6 too. I mean, the ball was out of his hands. If you see the replay, the ball was out of his hands, and you knew the guy was gone with that. Before he caught it, you knew that it was a touchdown for the cornerback that stepped in front of that.
Yeah.
But again, we will see how the season progresses here. But you made a joke during the game talking about being bored. I mean, you made a joke at the end of the first quarter, and it was true. You were like, "Oh, I'm going to go ahead and go." At that point, if you didn't do your Black Friday, Christmas shopping, and you're like, "Man, I only got a few more hours to do shopping before the sales are all gone this weekend," that would have been a good time to go out, right?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. But what can't be lost in this is the fact that for a while there, Washington was being shut out in the second half, and we talked about that. But the thing about this is you have to ask the question, right? And our good buddy Drew even asked the question: what do you take away from what we saw today in terms of the offense? I mean, are you confident that they've found the groove and they're back? Is it a situation where you have to say, okay, well, they did what they were supposed to do against a team that's not very good, and they're going to play a better team and all of a sudden going to go back to looking the way they were? Or is this just we're now back to playing the way we were early part of the season? I have my thoughts on it, Ken. What do you think?
I mean, I think it's a combination, right? I think they're definitely back in sync. I mentioned before this game, I wanted to see Washington go back at least early in the game to the short game, get in a rhythm. That's exactly what they did. I don't know if they're going to continue that. It might be dependent on the team that you're playing and what's open or not. But I like that we seem to simplify this game. Not as many not as many passes beyond 10 or 12 yards. And so that, again, that makes for a higher percentage. I don't know if we dropped the ball today, right? So easier passes for Jaden. He was on the money, through 84% completion percentage, no drops. And then the running game got going, right? B-Rob looks like he's healthy. Put it on his shoulders and carried it, early in the game, and then late in the game, give B-Rob a rest, and in comes Chris Rodriguez, and he pretty much just takes over where B-Rob was. It looked good. They did what they're supposed to do. But again, go ahead and put a little asterisk. It was against a bad team, but a solid defense. you know, are we going to look that way against Philly? You know, the in 3 weeks when we play them, maybe not.
Yeah.
But I like what we're doing in this game as far as how we attacked it. That I don't know if that's a direct answer for you,
I don't
but
know. It's
it was like
good.
we simplified. We went back and simplified it a little bit, and then as needed, yes, you can start stretching it out where you need to, but do the simple things, do them very very well, and then you can add on to that as it requires or as it's available during the game.
Okay, and that's fair, man. And I made a point last week and the week before the last two podcasts in that I don't know what to believe with this team anymore. And so for me, it's going to be a week to week, and they just have to show me. And so today they went out and did what they were supposed to do to a not so great opponent. They went out there and got back to basics and got back to doing what got this team off to a 7-2 start. Um, and yes, Tennessee's not a great team, but they're an NFL team. They are a team that beat the Houston Texans last week. They are a team that had the number 2 ranked defense. And that was the part that I was most concerned with, not their offense, because it was pretty much anemic. And I think that was the reason why they were a 3-8 team. But their defense was pretty good. It was very reminiscent of the Cowboys. And so I was concerned about how our offense would go against their defense. And yet we won that. And it wasn't issues with us killing ourselves, with the pre-snap penalties. There were a few, but we didn't kill ourselves. We didn't kill drives. We didn't kill momentum as we was going into this game. We got short field this week, and they capitalized. They made the team pay for those turnovers, whereas last week against the Cowboys, we did not. So we were back to doing the things that we were doing early and that made us successful. But can they be consistent? Can we say that they're back to being in sync and doing what they were doing before? And I don't know the answer to that. You get one game where you look back in sync, and then now you're going to go on a bye, a much needed bye, might I add, because there's a lot of injuries and things that this team need. No team should be having bye weeks in week 14. We talked about that. And but I won't get on that here. But the thing is, having a late bye like this is much needed. But what does that do to the rhythm, right? What does that do now when you get essentially a week off, and then you have 2 weeks actually between games, even though you're going to have a week of practice? And so how will they look going against New Orleans? Will they look as efficient? I don't know. Will they look as in sync? I don't know. Will the O-line block good and B-Rob running and the short game where I don't know. So I'm not going to make any big proclamation based on what I saw today, other than they did what they were supposed to do. They got back to playing the way they had been playing early in the season. And when they play that way, I think we're a tough team to beat. The problem is we got away from playing that way. For whatever the reasons were, we got away from it. And so unless and until they do that consistently week in and week out, I don't know if we're back. But I will say it was good to see us get back to doing it today, and that resulted in us putting up over 40 points on a scoreboard. And I was happy to see that.
Yeah, I mean the needle is pointing back up, at least a little bit. It's not pointing straight up, but it is pointing up after a game like that. And I mean, we all know that it's definitely better to go into a bye week with a win than a loss. You have to sit on that for a little while longer, especially if it had been a loss like the Cowboys game, right?
Right.
You don't want to sit on that for an entire week before you get back out to practice and everything. So there's a good confidence booster. We'll see how they come out against New Orleans and get healthy. Potentially. Marshawn Lattimore, the Saint, right? He might not play. Well, if he plays against the Saints, that means the last game he played for was for the Saints, and his first game as a Commander will be against the Saints. And I think that's probably going to happen. He was practicing a little bit this past week, and an additional 2 weeks is going to do his hamstring wonders. Hopefully. And our defense hopefully be just a notch better with him there at cornerback.
He plays. I'll make that prediction right now. He
Yeah,
plays in 2 weeks. Um, when the team travels to New Orleans to play the Saints, he plays that game.
right, right,
I just hope he doesn't try to overdo it and re-injures himself because he is playing his former team in his first action back, and he want to be able to put on a good show. But I hope he goes out and just plays within himself and within the system and just not re-injure himself during that game. Washington helped themselves, man. There's no doubt about that. Today, getting back in the win column and to the point that you make to be able to go off for 2 weeks, not just getting a win, but a convincing win. It wasn't an ugly win. It wasn't a last minute second win against a bad team. It was a very dominant performance and a convincing win. So the team is going to go into the bye week feeling good about themselves. They're going to
right.
go in and be willing to do a little extra film and do a little time away, work on those injuries and get healed up a little bit better for the last stretch of this for 4 games. And 4 games is going to, you know, I'm not going to say make or break, but it certainly is going to have an impact on how this season unfolds because I think Washington still makes the playoff, but it's a situation of where do they wound up in the seeding for the
Right.
playoffs because even though we were the 7th seed entering this week, we were the 7th seed holding the last spot into um, the 8 teams, if you will, that makes the playoffs. 17, sorry, that makes the playoff. There were a ton of teams that we were just a game in front of.
Right.
Right. There were a lot of teams that even though we had 7 wins, they had 6 wins. So we don't have a whole lot of room for error down the stretch. We have to take care of business. And I think and as long as we take care of business, we'll be fine. Now, how many times we heard that before? We just take care of what's in front of us and take care of our business, we'll be fine. And then the wheels fall off. I'm not
Right.
saying that I think that's the case here, but we're in a similar situation where if we just take care of business, it doesn't matter with the Minnesotas and the Rams and all the teams, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and all those teams that are a game behind us in the standings that are quote unquote in the hunt. Because right now we're in the driver's seat in the seventh spot as we entered this week. Now I don't know after all of today's games, I don't know how the standings are shaking out, but going into this week, we were in the 7th spot.
Yeah, yeah. And to your point, you want to be in control of your own destiny, right? For us to win the division, we might need a little bit of help for Philly to have an extra loss or two down the stretch. But we're in the December crunch, right? This is when the make or break. This is when playoff teams rise or fall, or potential playoff teams rise or fall. There's teams out there that we know that do have a history of playing well to this part of the season, and then they just fall apart. And there's teams that get to this part of the season and tighten things down.
Yep.
And even if they don't win the Super Bowl, they're like, you might not want to face that team in the playoffs, right? That's what we want the Commanders to be. I don't think, out of all the playoff teams that you line up in the AFC and NFC right now, that are at this moment, if the season ended today, the Commanders probably have one of the bottom 2 or 3 lowest chances, from a Vegas odds perspective. Not that they're a bad team, but they're just from a Vegas perspective, that there's teams that are significantly ahead of us.
Right.
That obviously we would have to jump, but hey, anything can happen. And as you start tightening things up, you use games like today to whoop up on the teams you're supposed to whoop up on, get a rhythm. I mean, to me, that's the biggest thing the last 3 weeks is mainly the last 2 weeks. They had a rhythm to some point if it wouldn't have been for drop passes against the Steelers. But the last 2 weeks is just like they couldn't get into a rhythm. Even when they were successful in scoring, it just seemed like, for lack of a better term, awkward scores, except for the last 5 minutes against the Cowboys. All of a sudden, everything was in rhythm. But it is neither here nor there. They took that last 4 or 5 minutes against the Cowboys and just carried it on to today.
Yeah, and I don't want to get too overhyped and too overexcited about today's game because, again, they did what they were supposed to do. I said before is that beating up on teams you're supposed to beat is good, but these aren't the teams you're going to play in the playoffs. And so you have to be able to prove that you can win against the better teams. And up to this point, even through 13 weeks, we've not proved that we can do that. We've played them close, right? We've not played our game in some cases where we've killed ourselves, but it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, we've not won against any of these teams. And so kudos to the team for getting back on track and beating up on a team, because I tell you, man, I have not watched much Tennessee football. And truth be told, I've not seen a single play of them and from them up to this point. And you see why they look like a 3-win team. Now, I got to believe that there's been times that their fans are saying, I don't know what the hell happened because we've played better than this. I mean, I think in the first quarter we talked about, I think we had, what was it? We had more plays and they had yards. So we had the same number of plays that they had total yardage. I think one of the guys at the table was talking about that. And it's like, because the offense couldn't get back on the field due to all the turnovers on special teams and fumbles by receivers and backs and whoever was just creating. It was just an ugly game for them. And they dug themselves a hole and were just never able to get out of it. And so that was a bad team. That was a bad performing team that we played. And the good news is we didn't play down to that. We took advantage of those opportunities and we did what we were supposed to do.
Right.
But if you ask me, what does that mean against Philadelphia in a couple of weeks? Couldn't tell you.
Oh, absolutely.
Couldn't tell you.
Yeah, you have a bye week. You hope you have a game similar against New Orleans. The Saints are as of today not they have to play the Rams today, but they're 4-7, right? If they lose today, that's 4-8. They've got twice as many losses as they do wins. We should win that game, but how are you going to look winning that game as you face Philly in Washington?
Yeah. One other thing here, Ken, I don't know how much more you have on this game, but I cannot believe that I guess we were too excited about getting back in the win column that we didn't talk about the big news that has transpired since our last podcast. And that is the release of Emmanuel Forbes, right? Second-year player, correct?
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Didn't finish his second year, but
but he was a second-year player in the NFL and was released. And I know a lot of fans, yourself included. I won't speak for you, but I'll let you go first. I'll let you give your thoughts on Emmanuel Forbes and his release.
I'm not surprised. He hasn't been able to see the field hardly at all. They tried to use him earlier here and there in the season. Hasn't played well. I mean, we've had some injuries and we've had games where we weren't looking good. Everybody's talking about it's so hard on St. Juice. And I'm not saying that St. Juice doesn't deserve some level of criticism, but as bad as St. Juice is, and if I'm going to say that he's doing bad, he's still that much better that the first rounder that you drafted the year before can't get on the field. And I said before the season started, based off of what I saw in the preseason, I saw in the scrimmage games, I saw him get. I mean, we saw in the scrimmage against the Jets, he was getting lit up left and right, just in people holding their phones with the guy. I said before the season, it wouldn't surprise me if he didn't get cut. I think the coaches and people like yourself that he might don't rule the guy out. He's coachable. He's got some level of talent that the previous staff saw, and he just never became that guy. I thought it was telling. I don't know what week it was. It was ballpark week 4, 5, 6. Joe Witt Jr. was asked about him, and he made the comment of he had been in all this season, all off season, put on some weight, was in there during the time, yada, 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 working hard, doing everything you're supposed to do to get better. And that was the end of the statement. I was like, he never said he got better. He never credited his skills. He was crediting his work ethic and that he was doing the things right. But I promise you, as a coach, if he was doing the things and getting better and making the plays, the coach definitely would have said so. And I mentioned it at the time. I don't know if I said it on the podcast, but I said it to you also. I mean, not only does this go back and it ends up going on the shoulders of Ron Rivera with his consistently poor drafting. I think one thing that is forgotten on this is Martin Mayhew. I criticized bringing in Martin Mayhew when he came. Martin Mayhew was the reason, was a major reason why Detroit Lions were horrible year after year after year after year. Martin Mayhew was there for a long time, and Martin Mayhew was somewhere else. I don't know off the top of my head. You might know, Reggie, but it was like everywhere he goes is horrible drafts. And we brought him here. People gave him a pass, maybe because he was a former Redskin, but he was trash here. Martin Mayhew will not have another NFL coaching or GM talent evaluator role in the NFL. He shouldn't.
Can it? Okay.
Can I get off my soapbox? Was I on my soapbox?
No. But let me just say this. If we were somewhere in public, but I'm gonna have to do this to you on this podcast. But if we were somewhere else, I'd pull you to the side and be like, "Hey, man, let me tell you something real quick. Martin Mayhew is still on our staff, Ken."
I thought he was gone.
That's a negative, sir. So,
well,
I'm sorry.
He needs to be gone.
So my point being is this: is you may consider him not a good talent evaluator, but he's still on the staff with Adam Peters and Dan Quinn.
And he must be getting Adam some coffee.
So
he must be getting Adam some coffee.
Listen, I will just say this, man. When you see stories like that, you have to be asking yourself, he clearly had his time in Detroit and he was helping Ron, but we know Ron had final say. And I don't know, what we don't know is who was the 51%, who was 49%. So the fact that Ron is not here and Martin Mayhew is, I'm going to say that I guess Ron made the final decisions, regardless of what Martin Mayhew wanted to do or didn't do. We're not here to debate that. I just wanted you to know, because again, if we were somewhere publicly, I'd probably pull you to the side and say, "Hey, man, you may want to not say that," because Martin.
Well, I said it anyway. And with that breaking news flash that Reggie just laid on me there, Martin Mayhew, you can exit right along with Jason Wright at the beginning of the season,
and he may
beginning of the new year, I should say.
And he may, but he's part of the staff that's turned this around, Ken. So you got.
I'm not giving him credit. He brought in come on, man.
Hold on, man. But what about he's on the staff now? You got to give him credit. He's there doing something.
No. Like I said, he's bringing coffee. And to your point. For one, I didn't know he was on the team. To be fair,
I know you did.
During the draft, right? They used.
They did, Ken.
The previous regime's talent evaluators or scouts to make the analysis, and then the current coaching staff and Adam Peters used that, looked at film, worked with them because it was too short of a time to pull in new scouts. And since the draft, they've all been, I guess, all but Martin Mayhew has been released.
Okay, so let me just say this, man. I'm going to be the voice of reason here, okay? And this is
I'm the voice of reality, and you're the voice of reason.
This is shocking coming from me, especially when it comes to talking about our squad here, man. But listen, Martin Mayhew and Ron Rivera are no different than any other GM. I mean, Adam Peters was over in San Francisco when they did the Trey Lance thing, right? So no front office is above making the bad call when it comes to talent and who they thinking may be the next guy. And Martin Mayhew is right there with them. The problem with Martin Mayhew and Ron Rivera specifically is the fact that they didn't just miss on Emmanuel Forbes. They missed on every single first round pick during their tenure from 2019 up until the time they left. Every single first round has either been cut, released, or traded. Every single first round pick. So you have a situation here where you have set the organization back. And I'm not saying they did it on purpose, but man, when you have no first round pick that is a key major contributor or has become a stud player, difference maker on your team, that is a bad indictment on the front office. And Martin Mayhew was part of that. But I'm not just going to say because he missed on Manuel Forbes that make him a bad talent evaluator, because what's the problem here is they missed on all of those guys. The only guy that received another contract, correct me if I'm wrong here, was Montez Sweat. And again, he was one that was traded. Jamin Davis released. Jahan Dotson traded. Chase Young traded. Somebody else was cut. And so I don't remember all of these guys.
Sweat wasn't a Rivera. Sweat wasn't drafted by Rivera.
Are you sure?
I
think they traded. I think they traded back in. Remember, they traded back into the first
they did,
round.
but I didn't know that was.
I think that was the first year they was here.
Okay.
But either way, none of their first round picks. So if they had hit on some of those other guys and missed on Emmanuel Forbes, we're not talking about it as much. But the fact that they missed year after year after year and tried to sell us on the fact that these kids were who they were and they were good, solid players and all those things. And then Emmanuel Forbes was supposed to be this ball hawk kid. And look, man, the kid played well in college. There's nothing for people to not like what we saw him do in college and in the SEC, no less. But at the same time, we saw the behind the footage where that was their guy. So they apparently done all this research that he's supposed to be their guy. And it turns out, man, the kid wasn't good enough to be selected in the first round, let alone where we picked him.
He couldn't last 2 years of the NFL as a first round pick. That's unheard of.
Well, I'm not going to say that because the league is littered where guys get released by their first team and they go on and have a long productive career somewhere else. I'm not ready to say that yet. Regardless of what the reasons why they released him, which we will never know, and we may find out later. Maybe the fact that he wasn't playing, he was having a bad attitude. Maybe he was knucklehead in the locker room. He was somewhat of a poison. And, I don't know all the things that Dan Quinn is trying to do to change culture. For all we know, that he's not handling the not suiting up and not playing well, and they just got rid of him.
Right.
Maybe he wasn't doing some of the things. They're like, look, man, we want you to do X, Y, Z to get better. And then we realize you're not even taking coaching well. Those are the things that we do not know and will not know. And it may come out later down the road, years later. Some of the reporters may tell us, but at this point, we don't know what ultimately led to it, because players will leave teams and go other places, and they continue to play and get better, right? I think it was, and I'm going way back here, but I remember watching Hard Knocks one time, man, many, many years ago, and they was doing the Cowboys. And I remember some kid, and I think it was Amendola. I don't know if he was undrafted or he was a late round pick. Guy couldn't make the team. He gets released by the Cowboys. Next thing you know, he winds up in New England, and he goes on to have a great career, made a lot of money. And I know that, and I'm just drawing a blank here, but I know the NFL is littered with guys who go on and play, and you realize, I didn't realize he was drafted by this team. And they go on because they get in a better situation, better coaching. I mean, look at the kid that's in Minnesota right now, the quarterback. I mean, it happens. So I'm not ready to say that Emmanuel Forbes can't go do what he's doing. Maybe he didn't think he'd get released because he's a first round pick. I don't know. I don't know what went on behind the scenes, but I'm willing to say I'm not willing to go on and say that he's a bust in the NFL. He just may not be cornerback one that he was drafted to be and where we had hoped him to be. He may end up going on and just may be a backup and a contributor on a team, make a lot of money in this league, and he just have a career. He just never turned out to be the future Hall of Famer cornerback that we wanted him to be when he was drafted by Ron Rivera. That's kind of where I stand on it, man. But clearly he couldn't get on the field here, and we wish him well.
Well, two things on that. One thing that I forgot to mention, it ran through my head, but I was up on my soapbox, and I turned to Martin Mayhew. But if Forbes would have turned out to be the player close to the player worthy of a first round pick, we wouldn't have given up draft capital for Marshawn Lattimore, right? We would have all those picks for next year to add on even more through the draft than what we have. And so not only did you miss on your first round pick, but now it cost you draft picks.
That's fair.
For Lattimore.
And I can't
also on Forbes. I mean, he wasn't the second round. I say second round. He wasn't the first one off the bench, right? When we went to a nickel package, he wasn't there. Went to a dime package. At the end here, he wasn't there. And then on top of that, he wasn't even playing special teams.
But I think that's why he wasn't.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree.
Yeah.
But it's that he couldn't or wouldn't do anything to get on the field and make yourself valuable to the team whatsoever. And
we have to be careful to say that he couldn't or wouldn't. All we know is he didn't play.
Right.
We don't know what the reasons were. So I'm not going to sit here and say that he wouldn't do it. He couldn't do it. I said
he couldn't or wouldn't.
But at the end of the day, he didn't play special teams. So therefore he was not going to be suited up because there were other guys who were your backups corner that played special teams.
But he was supposed to be a punt returner, I believe, that he did in college, if I remember right. I could be wrong on that. I've been wrong already once today on this show. But that's what I recall.
Either way, I think they tried him. I think during training camp, remember, we saw him doing, and they was trying to find a punt returner, and they was trying him back there and some things. I don't know, man. At the end of the day, it didn't work out. I think it was just kind of the final straw for a lot of fans and the indictment of Ron Rivera and his front office during the time here that not a single first-round pick remains on this team during that tenure, and that is a travesty for a franchise when you're trying to build an NFL team to win championships. And so Emmanuel Forbes didn't even make it 2 full years, and that is a problem. I don't know what all went into it. I don't know. Maybe, again, we don't know if he just simply can't play. Is it a situation where he became just disgruntled? He had a bad attitude, felt entitled,
or both, because clearly he couldn't.
Or both.
From our own, only with our own eyes. Anybody that tells me that he could play after watching him, I'd say, where are you seeing that proof?
That's fair.
If he was drafted as the 7th round pick, nobody would blink an eye. But because he's the 1st round pick, we hold him up on a higher pedestal. And I gave Ron Rivera credit when they cut
Dwayne
Haskins, because they knew Dwayne Haskins wasn't the quarterback to be a franchise quarterback, and the previous regime, it wasn't tied to Ron, and Ron's like, this is not the guy. We're not moving on with him. Let's cut bait and go on. This is what's happening with Emmanuel Forbes, and even with what's his name, the linebacker, tight end. I'm drawing a blank all of a sudden.
Linebacker, tight end,
linebacker that we moved to tight end this year as an experiment. Jamin Davis.
He wasn't a tight end. You mean line
Did I say tight
defensive
end? I
end?
meant defensive end.
That's
Defensive
what I was
end.
like.
defensive
What
end.
are you talking about?
Man,
Defense,
I'm losing it today. That's 2 mistakes in one podcast.
defensive end.
Man, defensive end. Maybe we should have moved him to tight end. Maybe we should have.
Oh my God.
Anyway, that's total sarcasm. But it's you didn't have any skin in the game for that. And you saw the guy couldn't be an NFL player on your team for what you needed, and so you just cut and move on. I think that's a great thing rather than hold on just because where he was picked, or maybe we can. Like I said, I think they might look back at the end of this year, and if they had to evaluate themselves, I got a feeling they would have said they should have just cut him at the.
I know you're trying to give them some credit here, but I think this is just a numbers game, right? They're struggling with the whole IR situation. You got guys. You see what happened with Chris Rodriguez. You're trying to bring guys back, release them, clear waivers, get the practice squad, do all those things to keep your players. You got all the corners. You got Sandra Steele. You got Quan Martin playing safety / corner. You got I don't even want to mention that guy's name. I think number 1 is his number. Ignogby or whatever his name is. Then you got number 20 Davis, and then you got St. Juice. And then to me, this is a clear indication to me that Marshawn Lattimore is on the bubble, on the cusp of coming back. So now you got a numbers game with you. Who's you going to have on the active roster? Some of those guys I just mentioned play special teams. There's no place for you to stash or you hold on to Emmanuel Forbes. So it was a numbers game, and so you had to let him go. There's no spot for him. And so again, numbers game, he got caught up just like Jamin Davis, and they had to make the decision. It was probably going to come anyway at the end of the season, but the trade for Marshawn Lattimore and the emergence of Sandra Steele and all these other guys, he became expendable. And he'll go on and probably play somewhere else or get on someone else's team, and they'll try to work him, and we'll see what happens. I'm not simply saying that he's going to turn this completely around and be Forbes Island, that type of deal, and just be locking down wide receivers. I'm not blind to that. I'm just simply saying this could be a wake up call for him, and he may go off and have a productive career and make a lot of money. Maybe not by NFL standard, but certainly by our standard, he make a lot of money and be able to go on and be just fine. So,
hey, if you can do it, go do it. But I certainly saw no indication that could happen while he was in Washington. But we'll enjoy our week off, man. It's going to be a week without watching the Commanders. This is going to sting a little bit. I'm not going to be at the bar. I'm not going to be at the game. I don't know what I'm going to do next weekend.
We'll find something to do. I will find something to do. I promise.
Yeah, but we'll follow up with a more detailed analysis and look at the Saints before we play them. You got anything else, Reg?
I got nothing else, man. But I'm glad we got the win. Get back in we're back in the left column instead of getting numbers in the right column.
Yep.
And we're gonna get this bye week, get healthy, and head down to the Crescent City, New Orleans. Here we come, baby.
All right. Till next time. Peace out, knuckleheads.
Peace out, y'all.